I stared at my phone screen, reading the text message for the 10th time. My father's words burned into my retinas like a brand. No failures at Christmas dinner this year. We want to keep it positive. The irony wasn't lost on me as I switched to my banking app, looking at his most recent request. Need $5,000 for emergency house payment. We'll pay back ASAP. It was the third such emergency this year, and we both knew he'd never paid back a dime. My name is Alexandra Chen, and according to my family, I'm a failure. Not because I dropped out of college or couldn't hold a job. Quite the opposite. I graduated summa cum laude from MIT and built a successful tech consulting firm. No, I was a failure because I chose my own path instead of joining the family restaurant business. Money doesn't matter if you abandon tradition, my father would say, even as he asked me for another loan. I closed my banking app and opened my email instead. There, buried among client meetings and project updates, was a notice from the county courthouse that made my heart skip. Notice of foreclosure auction 1456 Maple Street. My childhood home. My fingers hovered over my father's text message, tempted to respond, to tell him I knew about the foreclosure. But I'd learned long ago that direct confrontation wasn't the way to handle my family. Another text came through, this one from my brother Michael. Dad says you're not coming to Christmas. Good. Nobody wants to hear about your fancy tech job anyway. Michael, the golden child. The one who stayed to help run the family restaurants, even as they slowly failed one by one. He lived in the guest house behind our parents' home, rent-free of course, while I was the one actually keeping the mortgage paid. I switched to my secure email account, the one my family didn't know about, and wrote to my lawyer. Janet, proceed with Plan B. Use the shell company we set up. I want to be ready when the auction starts. The reply came within minutes. Already on it. Documents are prepared. They'll never know it's you. I set my phone down and walked to my home office window. From the 30th floor of my downtown apartment, I could see the neighborhood where I grew up. The house on Maple Street was barely visible, but I knew every inch of it. The creaky third step, the window of my old bedroom, the maple tree I used to climb when I needed to escape my family's disappointment. A week before Christmas, my mother called. Her voice dripped with the special kind of guilt only Asian mothers can perfect. Alexa, your father says you're not coming to Christmas dinner? That's what he told me, Mom. No failures allowed, remember? She sighed dramatically. You know he doesn't mean it. He's just stressed about money right now. The restaurants aren't doing well, and with the mortgage. I know about the foreclosure, Mom. Silence. Then, in a smaller voice, how did you find out? I have my ways. Why didn't you tell me things were this bad? We didn't want to worry you, she said, but we both knew that was a lie. They didn't tell me because telling me would mean admitting they needed help from the daughter they'd branded a failure. I could help, I said carefully. But things would have to change. Change. Her voice sharpened. You want us to change our traditions? Abandon our culture? Become cold and corporate like you? And there it was, the real reason I was banned from Christmas. Not because I was unsuccessful, but because my success threatened their way of life. Never mind, I said quietly. Merry Christmas, Mom. The day before Christmas, I received another text from my father. If you can send the $5,000 today, maybe we can discuss you joining us tomorrow. I showed the text to my assistant, Lisa, who had been with me since I started my company. She knew the whole story, had watched me send money home month after month while receiving nothing but criticism in return. Are you going to tell them? She asked. I shook my head. The auction is in 3 weeks. Let them have their Christmas without failures. Christmas Day, I sat in my apartment watching the security camera feed I'd had installed around my parents' house. I wasn't proud of the surveillance, but I needed to know what was really happening with the family finances. Through the cameras, I watched as relatives arrived for dinner. My aunts and uncles, all of whom had borrowed money from me at some point. My cousins who mocked my boring office job while living off their parents. And Michael holding court in the living room, probably telling everyone how well the restaurants were doing despite evidence to the contrary. My phone buzzed with pictures from the dinner. My mother always sent them, I think, to show me what I was missing. This year's photos showed the usual scene. The giant tree, the perfectly set table, the traditional dishes that I'd grown up eating. But I noticed other details too. The past due notices partially visible on the desk, the repair work needed on the walls, the subtle signs of financial distress that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Late that night after the guest had gone home, I watched through the cameras as my father sat at his desk, head in his hands staring at a stack of bills. My mother paced behind him, speaking rapidly in Mandarin, probably trying to figure out how to make next month's mortgage payment. I opened my laptop and logged into my banking portal. The temptation to send another payment was strong. It would be so easy to buy myself back into their good graces, to earn another temporary place at their table. Instead, I opened the auction documentation Janet had prepared. The shell company was ready, the financing secured. In 3 weeks, I would own my childhood home and my family wouldn't even know it was me. My phone buzzed again, another group text from Michael to the family. Great Christmas dinner. So nice to celebrate with the people who really matter. Some people choose money over family, but we know what's really important. I smiled despite myself. They had no idea what was coming. New Year's Day brought another desperate call from my father. This time he needed $10,000 for business expenses. I listened to him explain how this loan would be different, how the restaurants were about to turn around, how he'd definitely pay me back this time. I can't, Dad, I said finally. Not anymore. So this is how you repay us, he demanded. After all we've done for you? This is how you honor your family. I thought about the $200,000 I'd given them over the past 5 years. About the Christmas dinners I'd been excluded from. About the constant criticism of my choices, my career, my life. I'm done, I said quietly. Figure it out yourself. He hung up without another word. 2 weeks later, Janet called with an update. The auction is confirmed for next Thursday. Are you sure you want to do this? I looked at my latest bank statement, at the years of withdrawals labeled family support, at the dreams I'd put on hold to keep them afloat. Yes, I said. It's time they learned about consequences. The morning of the auction, I sat in Janet's office, watching via video conference as my childhood home went up for bid. My shell company, Winter Harbor Properties, was represented by another lawyer at the courthouse. The bidding started low. The housing market wasn't great and the property needed work. A few local developers made attempts, but they dropped out when our bids kept rising. In the end, Winter Harbor Properties purchased 1456 Maple Street for $475,000. Congratulations, Janet said, ending the video call. You're now your parents' landlord. I nodded, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Send them the standard new ownership notification. Let's see how long it takes them to figure it out. That evening my mother called in a panic. Alexa, the house, we just got a letter. Someone bought it at auction. I know, I said calmly. You've been in foreclosure for months. But where will we live? What about Michael? What about the family gatherings? I could hear my father in the background, probably already planning to ask me for money to fight the sale. The new owner is willing to let you stay, I said. As paying tenants. The letter should include the rental terms. But these rates, we can't afford this. You have to help us. I took a deep breath. No, Mom. I don't have to help anymore. I'm just a failure, remember? I'm not invited to Christmas. I'm not really family. Alexa, please check your email. I cut her off. The new owner's representative will be in touch about the lease terms. I hung up and waited. It wouldn't take long for the next phase to begin. The first month after the auction was a symphony of chaos. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family members, each one more desperate than the last. Michael was particularly vocal, sending angry texts about how the new owner was destroying our family heritage by insisting on actual rent payments. I watched it all unfold through the security cameras I'd installed. My father spent hours on the phone, probably trying to find another relative to borrow money from. My mother lit incense at the family altar daily, praying for a miracle. Michael paced the guest house, no doubt realizing his rent-free lifestyle was coming to an end. Janet handled all communications through Winter Harbor Properties, sending professionally worded emails about lease terms and maintenance requirements. The rent I set was actually below market rate, but to my family who had never paid a mortgage on time, it seemed astronomical. Ms. Chen, Janet said during our weekly update, your brother has requested a meeting with Winter Harbor's owner. He claims he can negotiate better terms. I smiled, remembering how Michael used to brag about his business acumen while running our parents' restaurants into the ground. Tell him the owner only communicates through property management. A week later, I received an email from my father, sent to my business account. Dear Ms. Chen, I know we've had our differences, but I need your help. Our house was sold at auction and the new owner is demanding impossible terms. Could you possibly loan us enough for 3 months' rent? Just until the restaurants recover. David Chen. The irony of him asking me for money to pay rent to myself wasn't lost on me. I didn't reply. Instead, I had Janet send another email to all tenants of 1456 Maple Street. Dear residents, Winter Harbor Properties requires all units to undergo safety inspections within 30 days. Please prepare for a thorough examination of all living spaces, including the main house and guest house. Sincerely, Property Management. The response was immediate. My mother called within minutes of receiving the email. Alexa, you have to help us. These people want to inspect the house. They'll see everything. By everything, she meant the code violations in Michael's illegal guest house conversion, the unpermitted kitchen renovation they'd done 5 years ago, and probably dozens of other issues they'd ignored over the years. What do you expect me to do about it, Mom? Talk to them. You work with big companies. You must know people. They can't just come in and change everything. I muted my phone for a moment, taking a deep breath. Actually, Mom, they can. They own the house now. Maybe if you told me about the financial problems sooner. You abandoned us, she cried. Chose your fancy career over family. And now you won't even help. I ended the call and pulled up the inspection report I'd already commissioned. The house needed about $150,000 in repairs to meet code requirements. Money I had, of course, but money they'd never see unless things changed dramatically. The day of the inspection, I watched through the security feeds as the inspectors went through every room. My mother followed them anxiously, trying to explain away every crack and violation. Michael stood in his guest house doorway, arms crossed, refusing to let them enter until they showed multiple forms of ID. That evening, Winter Harbor Properties sent out the inspection results, along with a detailed list of required repairs and a 90-day deadline for compliance. My father's response came through Janet. We'll need at least 6 months, and we expect the owner to pay for all repairs as there's structural issues. Janet's reply was swift. As per the lease agreement, tenants are responsible for any violations they created. Failure to comply within 90 days will result in eviction proceedings. The next few days were a blur of family emergency meetings, all of which I watched remotely. Aunts and uncles came by to offer advice. Cousins suggested legal action. Michael stormed around, declaring he knew people who could take care of this. Then came the message I'd been waiting for. My father swallowed his pride and sent an email to Winter Harbor Properties. Dear property owner, I request a private meeting to discuss our situation. We've lived in this house for 30 years. Surely we can reach an understanding. David Chen. I had Janet arrange the meeting for the following week at her office. She would attend as my proxy while I watched via closed-circuit TV from another room. My father arrived 15 minutes early, wearing his best suit, the one he saved for bank meetings and wedding banquets. He sat stiffly in the conference room, probably rehearsing the speech he'd prepared. Janet entered precisely on time, carrying a folder of documents. Mr. Chen, thank you for coming. I understand you wish to discuss the inspection results. Yes, he said, his voice carrying that familiar mix of authority and desperation. There must be some mistake. We've maintained that house perfectly for decades. These repairs you're demanding are all documented in the inspection report, Janet finished. Would you like to review the photos? She spread out pictures showing every violation, the cracked foundation, the faulty wiring, the unpermitted additions. My father's face fell as he saw 30 years of negligence laid bare. We can't afford these repairs, he said finally. And my son's guest house, he has nowhere else to go. The owner is willing to make a deal, Janet replied, pulling out another document. They'll pay for all repairs under 2 conditions. My father leaned forward eagerly. Anything. First, the guest house must be brought up to code or demolished. No exceptions. He nodded reluctantly. Second, Janet continued, the owner wants to meet with your entire family. In person. To discuss long-term arrangements. Meet the owner? But why? Those are the terms, Mr. Chen. Do you accept? He signed the agreement without reading it fully, something I'd seen him do too many times before. The meeting was scheduled for the following Sunday evening. Janet arranged for it to be held in the main conference room of my office building, neutral territory that my family had never visited. I arrived early, settling into the chair at the head of the table. Janet had dimmed the lights slightly, adding to the atmosphere of authority. On the table before each seat was a folder containing documents that would change everything. They arrived as a group: my parents, Michael, 3 aunts, 2 uncles and several cousins. Their steps faltered when they saw me sitting there. "Alexa," my mother said. "What are you doing here?" "We're waiting for the owner of Winter Harbor Properties." I smiled. Winter Harbor Properties is a shell company. I own it. I bought the house at auction. The silence was absolute. Michael's face turned red. My father gripped the back of a chair so hard his knuckles went white. He finally managed. "You bought our house." "No," I corrected him. "I bought my house. The one I've been paying for anyway, through all those emergency loans you never repaid." "How dare you?" Michael exploded. "Using your money to steal our home." "My money?" I opened one of the folders. "Let's talk about money, brother. Let's talk about the $200,000 I've given this family over the past 5 years. Let's talk about the restaurants you mismanaged into the ground. Let's talk about how you all banned me from Christmas but kept asking for handouts." "We're your family," my mother said weakly. "Family?" I laughed. Family doesn't exclude members for being successful. Family doesn't criticize every achievement. Family doesn't take and take and take while giving nothing but judgment in return. I stood up, distributing the folders. Inside you'll find 2 documents. The first is a detailed accounting of every dollar I've given this family, with interest calculated at standard market rates. The second is a new lease agreement. They opened the folders and I watched their faces as they processed the numbers. "If you sign the new lease," I continued, "I'll forgive the entire debt. I'll pay for all repairs to the house. Michael can stay in the guest house once it's up to code. But there are conditions." "What conditions?" my father asked, his voice hollow. "First, I get a key to the house, my house. I come to any family dinner I want to. No more bans, no more exclusions." My mother started to object, but my father silenced her with a look. "Second, no more emergency loans. No more financial bailouts. You live within your means or you find another place to live." "And third," Michael growled. "Third," I said, sitting back down, "you all need to understand something. Success isn't a betrayal. Choosing a different path isn't abandoning our culture. And money doesn't determine someone's worth to this family." I let that sink in before continuing. "You have 24 hours to decide. Sign the lease and accept these terms, or find new housing within 30 days. My father stared at the papers for a long moment. "All this, buying the house, the inspections, the repairs, why not just tell us? Would you have listened? Would you have changed? Or would you have just asked for more money while telling me what a failure I am?" One by one they left the conference room, folders in hand. Only my mother lingered behind. "The altar," she said quietly. "In the house. Will you let us keep it?" "Mom," I replied, feeling the weight of generations of tradition, "I never wanted to take away our heritage. I just wanted to be part of it on my own terms." She nodded slowly, then did something she hadn't done in years. She hugged me. The next day they all signed the lease. The repairs began immediately. Michael's guest house was rebuilt to code. The family altar stayed right where it was. 3 months later I received a text from my father. "Christmas dinner this Sunday. 6 p.m. Don't be late." I smiled, typing back, "I'll be there. After all, it's my house." Sometimes I realize now you have to become the landlord to teach your family about home truths. And sometimes the biggest room in the house is the room for forgiveness, once the proper foundations are in place.